It's 5th of October 2018. I'm in my local game store to pre-order Red Dead Redemption 2, and as I'm paying my deposit, I noticed behind the till a game from a franchise I once held so very close. I'd seen the promotion material for Odyssey and wasn't completely sold on the idea of an Assassin's Creed game based hundreds of years before the Assassin's Creed Origins game last year, and thought of it as more of a cash grab from Ubisoft, being as they had stated that they were no longer releasing AC games annually. But I just finished up Spider-Man on PS4 and thought, well hey, it's something that can tie me over till Red Dead Redemption 2, I might as well try it out. How the Mighty have fallen. I do not like this game as an addition to the Assassin's Creed franchise, and considered doing a review on it, but thought that my opinion was that of a minority, and that there'd probably be no point. But then, one of my favourite YouTubers, cleanprincegaming, video titled Assassin's Creed Odyssey is not an Assassin's Creed game, and I thought, yes, he's going to speak out against the game just like I wanted to. But although he did recognise that this is a very big step away from what the franchise once was, it was a change in the right direction. So I'm making this video essentially explaining why I think this is a step in the wrong direction and not how the franchise should continue. But to back up my reasons why, I need to talk you through the history of Assassin's Creed. So this video isn't my usual type of 5 to 10 minute long review, so sit back, zone in. It's your boy TJFL, and this is why Assassin's Creed Odyssey is not an Assassin's Creed game. The original Assassin's Creed game, that launched in 2008, was in my eyes a masterpiece. A brand new IP that put you in the role of the character Desmond Miles, who is abducted by a mysterious organisation called Abstergo, in which you are forced to use a machine known as the Animus, which allows you to access your genetic memories and relive the lives of your ancestors. You find out later on in the game that Abstergo Industries is actually the modern face of the Knights Templar, and that Desmond is a descendant of a long line of assassins that have fought against the Templars to preserve the right of free will, whereas the Templars are after artifacts known throughout history as the Pieces of Eden, as a means to achieve world harmony by using the Pieces of Eden to control mankind. Through the technology of the Animus, Desmond is forced to relive the memories of his ancestor in the 12th century called Altair to try and locate the Pieces of Eden, so that the Templars in the modern day can then find and use them to achieve their mission. The gameplay takes place in 3 cities in an open world format: Damascus, Acre, and Jerusalem. One thing I will never take away from any Assassin's Creed title is that the worlds in which Ubisoft have crafted are always gorgeous and do a fantastic job of showing a true representation of what the world would have looked like in that time period. The premise of the main story sees Altair given the task of assassinating 9 Templar leaders as a means to end the war between Templars and Assassins. Assassin's Creed introduced us to one of the very first and best climbing mechanics in a video game. Altair could scale every wall and jump across rooftops with ease, which led to some truly open-ended ways of tackling each mission. It also introduced us to a combat formula still used heavily to this day in titles such as Shadow of Mordor and Batman Arkham. Although this first attempt at it had some drawbacks, it was still much more refreshed compared to the alternatives of just mashing a singular button till every enemy drops. But what I felt was the best gameplay mechanic was the use of social stealth in an open world title. As an assassin, you could sit down on benches to eavesdrop on nearby enemies, escape a pursuit by hiding in a haystack, or even blend in with the crowd to get closer to your target before delivering the killer blow. This was a new take on the stealth genre, which truly had you hide in plain sight and made the player feel as if they are truly stalking their prey as an assassin. After assassinating the 9th Templar, it is revealed to you that there is in fact a 10th Templar who is Al-Mualim, the leader of the assassins. After this revelation, you confront Al-Mualim, who is using a piece of Eden, known as the Apple of Eden, to take control of people's minds and enslave them to him. After you have assassinated him, you take the Apple of Eden and it reveals to you the location of 28 other pieces of Eden. Despite the game's initial reception and mixed reviews, this will still be one of my favourite Assassin's Creed games, as it was this one that pioneered the series and introduced us to fresh new gameplay amongst a sea of first-person shooters at the time of its release. The story was fresh and left you wanting to know more about the world of the assassins and where those pieces of Eden came from. And of course, we got to use the staple of the series for the first time, the Hidden Blade. By most people's opinions, Assassin's Creed 2 is the best game of the series, and I can totally see why. Ubisoft did everything right with this one. All the good parts of the original Assassin's Creed were capitalized on, and the parts that let the original down were not removed, but simply changed to make them better. Still following the life of Desmond Miles, you find yourself escaping Abstergo Industries with the help of Lucy, an undercover assassin acting as a Templar in Abstergo. She relocates you to a hideout where you meet Sean and Rebecca, who are also assassins, and you're told of something known as the Bleeding Effect. The Bleeding Effect allowed Desmond to gain the abilities of his ancestors through the Animus, and become a fully trained assassin in a matter of weeks, thus setting up the premise that we'll one day get a modern day Assassin's Creed title. You're hooked back up to the Animus to now relive the life of everyone's favourite assassin, Ezio Auditore. The game takes place in 15th century Italy and tells the coming of age story of Ezio. Once a young man, rebellious and charismatic, decides to take up the mantle of assassin after his family, including his father, who was an assassin, is executed publicly. Ezio vows revenge for his family and works with his uncle Mario to become an assassin. The missions have you, again, hunting down Templars across Italy, but the story is so much more compelling this time, as there is real emotional drive behind Ezio's motives. The core gameplay stayed mostly the same, but the missions are much more varied and you never feel fatigued after playing through multiple missions. Something far less common in video games is that the side quests were also a joy to play, and they tied into the overall story. Therefore, as a player, you felt more compelled to play these missions. An example of this is that there are collectibles all over the world which are feathers, which you collect for your grieving mother to give her comfort. In most games I find myself avoiding such tedious side missions, but again, the motive behind it and the emotional weight compelled me to collect them. You find out the man behind the order of the execution of your family is Rodrigo Borgia, who was not only a Templar, but also had a piece of Eden known as the Staff of Eden. The game ends with you chasing down Borgia, who was leading the Templars to an ancient vault. After you beat him in a fist fight, you access the vault, only to be shown probably one of the biggest twists in gaming history. The vault played a pre-recorded message recorded by a species known as the First Civilization. Because of the critical reception of Assassin's Creed 2, Ubisoft decided that they would annualize Assassin's Creed, which brought us to the next part of Ezio's story. Brotherhood takes place directly after Assassin's Creed 2, with Desmond and his gang moving hideout to the homestead of Ezio. After being plugged back into the Animus, you find yourself in that same homestead, but through the eyes of Ezio, which sees you being attacked by the Borgia family, forcing Ezio to flee into the city of Rome. Only now you're given the task of rebuilding the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood in an attempt to overthrow what's left of the Borgia family. Brotherhood introduced the ability to call your fellow assassins to aid in battle. You can order them to take out rooftop guards as you infiltrate from the ground, or have them rescue you if you're being overthrown in a battle. This, along with the addition of more tools such as a crossbow, allowed for much more versatile ways to tackle objectives and prevented the game from ever feeling stale. The one thing, however, that did feel stale was the story. It did little to further the modern day plot, and ultimately was just a game used to pad out the time between the major releases in the franchise. Had it not been for the amazing gameplay and amazing characters that we are invested in, I doubt this game would have done so well. For me, this is one of the more forgettable games in the franchise. Not that I think it's a bad game, but it did little to further and whet our appetites for future releases. So, weirdly, this is in my top 3 Assassin's Creed titles, which might seem strange, as again, it did little to further the overall modern day plot, besides its major cliffhanger. In Revelations, Desmond is stuck in essentially what is a coma inside of the Animus, and this time, the gameplay really didn't change all that much. If it weren't for the exceptional writing and closing of the story of Ezio and Altair, I think this would have been one of the worst entries in the series. Ezio is now much older, and has travelled to the city of Masyaf, Altair's final resting place. He has travelled there to uncover the final secrets of Altair. Ezio finds a secret door below the Assassin Temple, which requires 9 keys to open. So, as video games go, you're tasked with finding these keys, which are, of course, in the hands of various Templars. And that's pretty much it for the story. Everything else is mostly filler, and the gameplay is seriously fatigued at this point. You can see the effects that annualization is having on such a good franchise. Sword combat is no longer challenging, as you can take out a string of enemies, and the missions are more linear, resulting in more of an action game as opposed to what I feel it should be, which is stealth. But nevertheless, you find all the keys to the mysterious vault and access it. Inside you find the skeleton of Altair, holding an apple of Eden. It is here that Ezio learns he is being used as a conduit to relive the memories of time, and addresses Desmond, acknowledging that it is Desmond that must solve this mystery, not Ezio. Soon after, in the modern day, Desmond is greeted by a member of the first civilization who reveals the final piece of the puzzle. The first civilization were here centuries before, using humans as slaves. But after a global catastrophe, the first civilization was wiped out, and humans then gained reign over the earth. He then warned that another global catastrophe was due to happen, and that the first civilization had designed a vault which would prevent the catastrophe from happening again, and that Desmond must go to it if he wants to save the planet. Despite the shortcomings of this game, it did, as the title alluded to, and also closed off the story of Ezio and Altair nicely. I can't say they did the same for Desmond. The hype for this game was insane. Brand new games engine, a promise of closure for the story, and what I had been waiting for, the modern day assassin. Well, I have no idea what happened over at Ubisoft, but somebody really ballsed up that ending. To get the easy stuff out of the way first. Although divisive, the gameplay was outstanding. Free running was improved dramatically, and you now had the ability to traverse through trees. Combat was improved, now feeling more fluid and making you feel much more agile. The social stealth mechanics had been revamped, in which they are now felt to be more natural in terms of how you would act yourself in those situations. All in all, gameplay was great, and it was a step in the right direction for this franchise. But the story was just a mess. It really felt like the writers wanted to make it as epic as they could, without taking into consideration potential future titles and the overarching story. Again, through the eyes of Desmond Miles, you play as Connor, an American native whose home and people are massacred by leaders of the Templars, including your estranged father, during the time of the American Revolution. This sets you out on your mission to become an assassin once more, but this game takes way too long to get to a place where you are actually an assassin. It's not until about 8 hours in, if you rush, that you even don the hood. A lot of people take issue with the character of Connor and find him quite two-dimensional, but in defense of Ubisoft, I do think it is quite hard to follow up on such a loved character as Ezio, without essentially copying the same character. But it does make it hard to believe and care about Connor's motives when you haven't emotionally invested in him as a character. The overall story of Connor's doesn't really do all that much to contribute to that of Desmond's, which is really frustrating, as that is the point of us looking through the Animus. But we progress in the modern day no less, which finally allows us to have some modern day segments playing as Desmond, sneaking around and taking out enemies. But unfortunately, it's short lived, as the writers just decided to do a Game of Thrones on Desmond. The finale sees you accessing the Vault in America, which you were told about by the first civilization to prevent the end of the world. In the Vault, Desmond is greeted by two members of the first civilization, Minerva and Juno, who both tell him what happens if he chooses to prevent or allow the end of the world. Option 1. He prevents the end of the world, which in turn would end his own life, and it would also allow Juno to escape into the world and seek revenge on the humans that were once slaves to her. Option 2. He allows the end of the world to happen while taking shelter in the Vault, and he, with the Templars, unite to bring about a new world of order, peace and harmony. I mean, both endings are crap, but I suppose if you're not making another game, it's kind of okay. But Desmond decides to go with option 1, and sacrifices his life so that not everyone would die, but in turn releases Juno to seek revenge on Earth. I'm really lost for words at this point as to why they decided to go with these two options, as they are both just so over the top and nonsensical. But as I said, if you're not making another game, then I suppose it would be okay to kill off the main character, who was a pillar of the franchise. I mean, it's not like they did make another one. And now we enter the realm of Ubisoft not knowing what the hell to do with the modern day storyline, and really just going for a cash grab on the franchise. Most people actually enjoy Black Flag, and I'm one of those few people who despise this Black Flag and couldn't even bring myself to finish it. And this will prelude to my feelings of Odyssey. This is a great pirate game, but it's a terrible Assassin's Creed game. And I can see why people love this game. It encourages exploration, keeps the same fluid combat. It's one of the best pirate games you could possibly play, and I myself enjoyed it for all the same reasons. But as someone who has been deeply invested in the lore of Assassin's Creed, I felt cast aside as a loyal fan, as the game did little to answer the consequences of the previous game. And the story of the assassin you play, Edward Kenway, has very little to do with Assassin's Creed, besides the fact he's Connor's grandfather. I'm not going to say much more about this title, as I understand my opinion is that of a minority, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to rile you up more when I get onto the next game. I love Assassin's Creed Unity. I've put more than 100 hours into this game, and I always feel it never got the credit it deserved. When it launched, it was a buggy mess, but I picked the game up about 6 months after release, and I still play it regularly even now. If you have it on your bookshelf or need a game to play now, honestly, go pick up Unity. In terms of the modern day story, well, it's pretty much dead at this point, and even up to Odyssey I consider it dead, so I won't be mentioning it much after this point. All the unanswered questions of previous video games don't look like they'll ever be explained, and it's one of the reasons my love for the series has died off. And it's a shame as they built such strong lore around it, but you know, I'll move on. Unity follows the life of Arno, clearly inspired by Ezio, and it pays off well. He's a likeable character with enough charm to see you through the darker times of the French Revolution. Instead of what had been the previous trend of plots in this series, this time we got a love story, which actually turns out to be extremely compelling and also fresh. Arno's childhood friend, Elise, is the daughter of a Grand Templar, who is assassinated publicly, and after Arno is wrongfully imprisoned as a result of the murder, he escapes with the help of an assassin, who then invites him to become one of them. The story does follow similar tropes of previous games, in which you are hunting down Templars, but the Romeo and Juliet style of storytelling makes the ideology of who is good and who is bad much more blurred, and this is one of my favourite Creed storylines, despite not being heavily linked to the original main plot. What really made this game stand out, which is the complete opposite of popular opinion, is the gameplay. Ubisoft totally reworked the entire game's engine and overhauled every gameplay mechanic, which brought us probably the best iteration of a stealth action assassin. So, to list a few of the ways the gameplay changed for the better. Direct combat was made to be more challenging. You could no longer take on multiple foes at once and expect to get out alive. Mission structures were heavily inspired by Hitman, and you're given multiple ways to approach it, albeit stealth or action. They added the ability to crouch, something which should have been added a long time ago. Crowds are huge in quantity, allowing for a much more believable and immersive social stealth. RPG elements were added, such as the ability to upgrade weapons and armor. The free running was now more refined, with the ability to scale either up or down at the press of a button, eradicating the issue of accidentally falling to your death or directly into the enemy's line of sight. And those are just some of the ways the game was improved upon. And I promise you that if you go play this game now, you will enjoy it, unlike most who played it at launch. The other feature I spent a lot of time on in Unity was the multiplayer. I didn't really touch on it in previous titles because, truthfully, I haven't played a substantial amount and it's impossible to find anyone to play with it now. But the general consensus is that they were good. But in Unity, you were finally able to run around with your friends across the rooftops of Paris, causing mayhem, or you could be participating in a multitude of co-op missions ranging from assassinations to bank heists. The multiplayer felt very reminiscent of that of Splinter Cell Blacklist, and it's such a shame that we'll probably never see this come to fruition in the newer games. If this game had not been a shambles at launch, I really do believe it would have been the formula for the Assassin's Creed franchise going forward. It's crap. It's just crap. I don't even want to waste my time on this game. It's forgettable. The story's forgettable. The gameplay was horrid and almost comic-like. I really can't force myself to talk about this game. I hate it, and I'm happy that it was a failure commercially. So after the delightful failure of Syndicate, Ubisoft did the smart thing. They took a year off Assassin's Creed to re-evaluate the franchise and gameplay. And my god, Origins was a comeback. Instead of what's usually expected of Ubisoft, which is to recycle previous games' mechanics, they decided to go all in on the RPG mechanics, which were first introduced in Unity, and make it a full-blown RPG. The story takes place in ancient Egypt. You take control of a Medjay, something similar to that of a nowadays sheriff called Bayek, whose backstory does little to differ from the original titles, but due to the great acting and strong character development, made his motives more believable than previous entries. His son is murdered at the hands of his own under the manipulation of the Order of the Ancients, who were the first roots of the Templars. Fueled by rage, Bayek sets out to seek vengeance for those who were responsible for his tragedy. Origins introduced us to the foundations of the Assassin's Creed, the Templars, and even the Hidden Blade, whilst also softly rebooting the modern day storyline. Origins only offers about 15 minutes screen time on the modern day story, but it was nice to see they hadn't completely cut it out. Being as it was set in ancient Egypt, there are no tall skyscrapers crammed together to run across. But it makes sense due to the setting and also this being an origin story. Despite the heavy focus on melee combat, which is much more in line with Dark Souls than it is with previous entries, stealth is still a valid option at this point, and sometimes better due to leveling issues. And that is my only issue with Assassin's Creed Origins, is the leveling system. Putting numbers above an enemy's head to dictate their strength, it just feels like it ruins the immersion, as the enemy you're fighting could literally be wearing nothing but cloth, but will still take 50 arrows to the face and not die. But overall, I really enjoyed Assassin's Creed Origins, and I feel it did a great job at breathing life back into the series, and feel like it did the original games justice. The reason you're all here. Assassin's Creed Odyssey took the RPG elements from Origins, put them on blast, and also cast aside the right steps Origins made. As this is still a relatively new title, I'll do my best to remain tight-lipped regarding spoilers, but be aware there may be some light spoilers ahead. So, just quickly, let me bring you back to Assassin's Creed 1. The Animus is a device which is used to relive your ancestors' memories. You are not in control of the actions, nor can you change the outcome. You are simply in the seat of a roller coaster along for the ride. Assassin's Creed Odyssey's first mistake is letting you choose what gender you play as. This makes no sense in Assassin's Creed lore, and the way they try and explain it, it is clearly an indication that they know it shouldn't work. The second mistake, which completely just boggles my mind, is that in Odyssey, you have multiple dialogue options with NPCs. This again, it just makes no sense because you are not in control of what you are seeing. You cannot change anything, you are simply viewing a memory. The third and biggest mistake with Odyssey is that you're not even an assassin. In an Assassin's Creed game, you are not an assassin. You have no hidden blade, which is the staple of the series. Set before the title literally called Origins, and the plot tries so hard last moment to make it relevant, it makes all past entries invalid. I can't say too much without spoiling, but if you have completed it, can't you see that the ending literally makes everything that Desmond did pointless? In terms of gameplay, they decided to make the enemies even more of a sword sponge than they were in Origins. You will spam the attack button for minutes until the enemy surpasses, which is boring and tedious. I understand that the combat from some of the previous titles was way too easy, but how it is now just breaks the immersion. I'm telling you now, put a guy in front of me with just a cloth on and I'll see how many times he can survive a strike from a sword. The stealth mechanics are also just watered down now. In Origins it was possible to complete missions completely stealth, but now because of the leveling and the tools at your disposal, stealth is pretty much a no-go, and more effort than it's worth. I'm meant to be playing as an assassin, aren't I? If Ubisoft, which is, by the way, a company that I love, had some balls and just made this a new IP, independent of Assassin's Creed, I would definitely agree that this is a great game. But because it bears the title of the series I once loved so dearly, and have invested hundreds of hours into, can't help but dislike the game. Like cleanprincegaming said, this is a complete U-turn on the series, and this is the direction that Assassin's Creed is going to go, regardless of my opinion. But I feel that I must express that this change is not good for everyone. There are still some of us waiting for that Assassin's Creed game with a heavy emphasis of moving the original modern day storyline forward and putting us perhaps in the control of a modern day assassin. Then some of these newer features, such as multiple dialogue options, would probably make sense and they would be welcomed by myself. But I don't think we're ever going to see that game come to fruition. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Let me know how many of you feel the same way about the series. It's been your boy TGFL. I hope you guys enjoyed this longer video. Peace out.